Log entry 456.782, Zenithian date cycle, 87.33.021. Recording officer, Dr. Xarlon Vex, department head, quantum neural programming. Oh, look, another day in paradise. The twin suns of Zenithia are blazing through my office window. My three assistants are cowering in the corner after I corrected their pathetically simple mathematical errors. And the Galactic Academy Board has just informed me that we'll be hosting a wait-for-it human exchange student. Yes, you heard that correctly. A human. At the most prestigious learning institution in 7-star systems. Has the universe gone completely mad? For those unfamiliar with my extensive and frankly brilliant academic career, I am Dr. Xarlon Vex, the foremost expert on quantum neural programming in the known galaxy. My 12 cerebral lobes have produced over 300 groundbreaking research papers. I've received the Zenithian Science Medal 7 times consecutively. I even turned down a position on the Galactic Council of Knowledge because it would interfere with my research. And now they expect me to babysit some primitive bipedal creature from a backwater planet that only achieved faster than light travel less than 2 centuries ago? It's good for interspecies relations, Academy Director Navix told me this morning, his eye stalks twitching with what I can only describe as sadistic pleasure. The diplomatic corps believes educational exchange will foster understanding between our civilizations. Understanding? What's to understand? I shot back. They discovered electricity barely 3 centuries ago. Their neural pathways are practically linear compared to ours. The Academy's grand entrance hall was bustling with the usual beginning-of-term chaos when this human arrived. Alex Reeves, they called themselves, standing there with that ridiculous flat face, only 2 eyes, and a disturbing lack of tentacles. Wearing what appeared to be their formal attire, a navy blue outfit they called a suit, which did nothing to hide their structural inadequacies. Dr. Vex. Director Navix waved me over with excessive enthusiasm. Alex Reeves, our exchange student from Earth, top of their class at something called MIT. Very prestigious, apparently. The human extended one of its upper appendages toward me. Some sort of greeting ritual, I presume. Dr. Vex, it's an honor to meet you, the human said. I've studied your work on quantum entanglement as applied to cognitive mapping. Absolutely revolutionary. Well, at least it had good taste in academic literature. Yes, well, that paper was merely a preliminary exploration, I replied, reluctantly touching my tentacle to its appendage. The sensation was unpleasant, too solid, too warm. My subsequent papers developed the theories much further, though I doubt they've been translated into whatever primitive language you speak. English, it replied with an upward curving of its mouth parts. And actually, I read them in the original Zenithian. Took me a couple of years to become fluent, but worth every minute. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't momentarily stunned. Zenithian is notoriously difficult for non-natives to master, with its 17 tonal variations and quantum state grammar. Most other species don't even try. Before I could formulate a suitably dismissive response, Director Navix was already continuing with his excessive hospitality. Alex has expressed particular interest in your quantum neural programming course, Dr. Vex. We've added them to your advanced class. My advanced class? I nearly ejected ink in shock, a reflexive response my species evolved for expressing extreme displeasure. Director, that course is reserved for final-year Zenithian students who have already completed a decade of preliminary studies. It takes 10 years minimum to develop the neural plasticity required for even basic quantum programming concepts. The human Alex had the audacity to look amused. Its face made some sort of expression that displayed its flat, white teeth. With all due respect, Doctor, I believe humans may have certain cognitive advantages that might compensate for our different neural architecture. I'd like the opportunity to try. Try? Try. This wasn't some recreational activity. This was the pinnacle of Zenithian scientific achievement, Quantum neural programming wasn't just about understanding code and quantum states. It required the programmer to literally think in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Even most Zenithians struggled with the concepts. The idea that this primitive creature could just waltz in and try was beyond insulting. "Fine," I finally said, my voice dripping with contempt. "But don't expect any special accommodations. The course begins tomorrow at first sunrise. I suggest you prepare for disappointment and possibly neural hemorrhaging." As the human was led away to its quarters, I noticed several of my colleagues watching with expressions ranging from amusement to pity. Professor Zoltrax from theoretical physics actually laughed a grating, bubble-popping sound. 10 credits says the human drops out within a week, he gurgled. 3 days, I corrected him. And that's being generous. Little did I know how spectacularly wrong I was about to be proven. Log entry 456.783, Zenithian date cycle, 87.33.022. Recording officer, Dr. Xarlon Vex, department head, quantum neural programming. The first day of class. Normally a day I approach with the enthusiasm of someone about to have all their teeth extracted without anesthesia. Today, however, I arrived with unprecedented anticipation, not because I was excited to teach, mind you, but because I couldn't wait to see the human fail spectacularly. My advanced quantum neural programming class consists of 12 of Zenithia's most brilliant final year students. And now 1 human. They all sat in their hoverpods, neural interface tendrils at the ready. Except for Alex Reeves, who sat on a specially modified chair, looking painfully out of place, with nothing but a primitive tablet device, and I still can't believe this physical writing implements. Actual sticks that deposit pigment onto processed plant matter. How quaint. Quaint. "Welcome to Advanced Quantum Neural Programming," I began, letting my tentacles ripple impressively. "For those who somehow managed to pass the preliminary decade of studies, congratulations. For our special guest." I flicked my eye stalks toward the human. "Well, I suppose congratulations on your optimism." Several of my Zenithian students bubbled with laughter. The gelatinous twins from the northern continent, Blorix and Florix, actually changed color from their usual translucent blue to an amused purple. "Today we begin with 11-dimensional matrix cohesion," I continued. As you know, quantum neural programming requires the programmer to conceptualize multiple realities simultaneously while maintaining primary consciousness in this dimension. Your brains must function as both observer and participant in the quantum state, collapsing the wave function while simultaneously preserving it. I activated the classroom's holographic display, showing the intricate neural pathways of a Zenithian brain during quantum programming. The swirling colors and pulsating pathways formed beautiful, complex patterns that would make any neuroscientist weep with joy. "This," I said, gesturing grandly to the display, "is what a properly trained Zenithian brain looks like during quantum programming. The neural density in our frontal asymmetric lobes allows us to process quantum states as naturally as you might, ride a primitive bicycle." I turned to Alex. "For comparison, this is what a human brain looks like." I switched the display to show a pathetically simple human neural structure. Notice the lack of quantum-sensitive neural clusters? The absence of multi-dimensional thought capacitors? The embarrassingly linear processing patterns? Several students snickered. The human, to my surprise, didn't seem offended. Instead, they leaned forward, studying both brain scans with genuine interest. "Fascinating," Alex said. "Our neural architecture is certainly different, but I notice interesting similarities in the temporal lobe region. In humans, that's where we process complex patterns and abstractions." "Dr. Vex, would you say quantum programming is more about perceiving patterns across dimensions, or actively manipulating them?" The question wasn't entirely stupid, which was disorienting. "Both, obviously," I replied, somewhat taken aback. One cannot manipulate what one cannot perceive, and perception without manipulation is merely passive observation, useless for programming purposes. Like learning to play a musical instrument, Alex nodded. You need to hear the music and create it simultaneously. A grossly simplified analogy, but not entirely incorrect, I conceded reluctantly. Moving on with the lesson, I connected the neural monitors to each student. When I reached Alex, I hesitated. These were designed for Zenithian physiology. They may cause discomfort or possibly permanent neurological damage to your species. Alex smiled. I'll take my chances. Your funeral, I muttered, attaching the devices to the human's temples. Now, students, activate your quantum perception fields. Visualize the 11-dimensional space before you. See how the quantum particles exist in all states simultaneously. Your first task is simply to observe without collapsing the wave function. My Zenithian students slipped easily into the proper mental state, their consciousness expanding beyond our dimension. The monitor displays showed their brains lighting up in the correct patterns, though some showed better aptitude than others. Then there was Alex. The human closed its eyes, brow furrowed in concentration. The neural monitor displayed nothing. Well, not quite nothing. Conventional brain waves, certainly, but nothing approaching quantum perception. Don't strain yourself, I said. Perhaps try thinking about something simpler, like addition or your planet's primitive combustion engines. More laughter from the class. After 20 minutes, even the weakest Zenithian students had achieved basic quantum perception. Alex's monitor remained stubbornly ordinary. Well, I said, not bothering to hide my satisfaction, it appears some skills simply require the proper biological equipment. No shame in recognizing one's limitations, especially when they're as fundamental as having an inferior brain structure. May I try a different approach? Alex asked, surprising me with their persistence. By all means, I replied magnanimously. Though I don't see how a different approach will overcome a fundamental neurological inadequacy. Alex removed the neural monitors and instead picked up their archaic writing implements. Sometimes humans learn better through analogies and visualization before direct experience. Mind if I work this way for a bit? I waved a tentacle dismissively. Whatever makes you feel better about your impending failure. The class continued, with my proper Zenithian students progressing to simple quantum programming exercises while Alex scribbled frantically in a notebook. Occasionally the human would mutter to themselves or draw diagrams that looked like childish scrawls compared to the elegant quantum visualizations floating around the rest of the classroom. By the end of the session, my point had been thoroughly proven. The human had produced nothing but ink on paper, while even my least talented Zenithian student had successfully programmed a quantum circuit to solve a four-dimensional equation. Don't be discouraged, I told Alex as the class dispersed, my voice dripping with false sympathy. 10 years of preliminary study is the minimum for a reason. Perhaps we can find you a more suitable class, basic arithmetic for non-sentient species, perhaps. Thanks for the suggestion, Dr. Vex, Alex replied with that strange upward curve of their mouth again. But I think I'll stick with this class. Today was informative. I believe I understand the fundamental principles, now I just need to find my own way to access the quantum states. Their optimism was almost endearing in its delusion. Almost. As you wish, I said. Tomorrow we move on to actual programming. I recommend preparing yourself for even greater disappointment. As the human left, I couldn't help noticing they weren't hanging their head in shame as expected. Instead, there was a determined gleam in those two inadequate eyes. How strange. Most species would have recognized their inferiority by now. Humans, it seemed, were either remarkably resilient or remarkably stupid. Possibly both. Log entry 456.784, Zenithian date cycle 87.33.023. Recording Officer Dr. Xarlon Vex, Department Head, Quantum Neural Programming. I arrived at my laboratory this morning to find the door unlocked. Strange. My security clearance is among the highest at the Academy, and no one else should have access outside emergency protocols. Inside, hunched over a neural interface terminal, was the human. Alex Reeves, surrounded by crumpled papers covered in those primitive markings they call writing. "What in the name of the 7 moons do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my tentacles flaring with indignation. "This is a restricted area." Alex jumped, clearly startled. "Dr. Vex." "I'm so sorry. Director Navix gave me permission to use the lab after hours. I should have asked you directly." "Navix has no authority to," I began, then stopped as I noticed what was on the terminal screen. It was a visualization of quantum states, but unlike anything I'd seen before. Instead of the standard 11-dimensional matrices we Zenithians use, this was something else entirely. "What is this?" I asked, curiosity temporarily overriding my outrage. "It's a musical representation of quantum states," Alex explained, sounding both exhausted and excited. "I spent all night working on it. You see, humans have difficulty visualizing 11 dimensions simultaneously, but we can process complex auditory patterns remarkably well." "Music? You're trying to reduce quantum neural programming to music?" The absurdity was almost physically painful. "Not reduce, translate," Alex corrected. "Each tone represents a dimensional state, each rhythm a probability cluster. The harmonies map to entanglement patterns." I moved closer, skeptical but intrigued despite myself. "That's not entirely nonsensical. But processing quantum information requires direct neural interface. Sound waves are far too crude a medium." "That's what I thought too," Alex said, "until I tried this." They pointed to a modification they'd made to the neural interface, a primitive-looking contraption attached to the standard Zenithian equipment. "What have you done to my equipment?" I was horrified. These interfaces cost more than the gross domestic product of some planets. "It's non-invasive," Alex assured me. "I noticed that Zenithian neural interfaces use quantum resonance to stimulate your multi-lobed brains. Humans don't have the same neural architecture, but we do have something you don't. An extraordinarily developed auditory cortex capable of processing multiple layers of sound simultaneously." So I reconfigured the interface to translate quantum data into auditory patterns. "Watch." Alex put on what looked like audio receivers over their ears, closed their eyes, and began to hum softly. To my astonishment, the quantum matrix on the screen began to shift and reshape itself. Not with the precision of a Zenithian programmer, certainly, but definitely not random noise either. "Impossible," I whispered, all 8 of my eyes widening. After a few minutes, Alex removed the audio device, visibly drained but smiling. "It's working. I can hear the quantum states, Dr. Vex. It's like the most complex symphony imaginable." "This is highly unorthodox," I muttered, examining the modified interface, "and likely dangerous. Human brains aren't designed to process quantum information." "Neither were Zenithian brains, originally," Alex countered. "Your own research suggests your species developed quantum neural pathways through evolutionary adaptation to Zenithia's unusual magnetic fields. We humans may lack that adaptation, but we have others. Pattern recognition, lateral thinking, synesthesia. I hate to admit when I'm wrong, truly hate it. But watching the human manipulate quantum patterns through what was essentially humming a tune, it was impossible to dismiss entirely." "I'd like to observe this technique in class today," I said finally, "though I doubt it will advance beyond this rudimentary level." The rest of the day became increasingly disturbing. In class, while the Zenithian students connected to their interfaces in the traditional way, Alex sat with their modified audio device, eyes closed, occasionally tapping a rhythm on the desk or humming quietly. At first, the other students found it amusing. Blorix and Florix actually mimicked the humans' humming, generating ripples of laughter around the room. But the laughter faded when the classroom's main quantum display showed Alex's progress. The human was solving quantum equations, not with the elegance of a Zenithian programmer, but with a strange, almost artistic approach that somehow worked. "What exactly are you doing?" I finally asked, my scientific curiosity overcoming my prejudice. "I'm translating quantum states into musical structures," Alex explained. "To me, entangled particles sound like harmonizing instruments. Superposition is like a chord with all notes sounding simultaneously. Wave function collapse is a resolution to the tonic." Several of my students exchanged glances. Tarvik, my most promising pupil, actually abandoned his exercise to observe Alex's work. "That's not how quantum mechanics works," I insisted, though with less certainty than I'd have liked. "It's not how Zenithians interface with quantum mechanics," Alex corrected gently. "But it seems to be a viable approach for human cognition." By the end of the class, Alex had successfully completed 3 of the 5 exercises still behind the Zenithian students, but light years ahead of where a human should be. The achievement was undeniable. As the students filed out, I noticed several Academy officials hovering near the doorway, including Director Navix and Professor Zeltrax from the Board of Standards. Their expressions ranged from curious to openly concerned. "A word, Dr. Vex," Director Navix called, his eye stalks rigid with tension, a sure sign of political trouble brewing. I knew what was coming. The Academy hierarchy was built on the supremacy of Zenithian cognitive abilities. Having a human discover an alternative method of quantum programming after just 2 days threatened not just scientific orthodoxy but cultural prestige. Glancing back, I saw Alex still at their station, oblivious to the stir they'd caused, humming softly as quantum patterns danced across their screen. For the first time in my distinguished career, I felt a twinge of concern for a non-Zenithian. The human had no idea of the political storm they'd just unleashed. Log entry 456.785, Zenithian date cycle, 87.33.024. Recording officer, Dr. Xarlon Vex, department head, quantum neural programming. 3 days. Just 3 utterly inconceivable days. That's all it took for everything I thought I knew about cognitive hierarchy across species to come crashing down around me. The emergency faculty meeting was called at first light. I'd barely had time to consume my morning nutrient bath before being summoned to the Academy's Grand Council chamber, a space typically reserved for intergalactic diplomacy or major scientific announcements. The fact that they'd convened it for a discussion about one insignificant human should have been laughable. But no one was laughing. "Dr. Vex," began Grand Chancellor Morvidus, all 6 of his eye stalks focused unblinkingly on me. "We understand your student has made unusual progress." I shifted uncomfortably. "The human has developed an unorthodox method of interfacing with quantum states. Yes, it's scientifically interesting, but hardly." "We've reviewed the neural monitoring logs," interrupted Professor Zeltrax, waving a data crystal. "In 72 hours, this human has achieved quantum programming capabilities that match those of a third-year Zenithian student." An uneasy ripple passed through the assembled faculty. 3 days versus 3 years? Put that way, it did sound rather concerning. "The method is crude," I argued, feeling strangely defensive. "They're essentially translating quantum mechanics into auditory patterns. It's like painting by numbers instead of understanding art theory." "Yet the results are undeniable," said Director Navix. "The human completed yesterday's advanced programming challenge, Dr. Vex. Their quantum algorithm for dimensional folding was not only functional but demonstrated several novel approaches our own students haven't explored." I felt a peculiar mixture of professional pride. After all, they were my student, and deep existential discomfort. For thousands of years, we Zenithians had based our galactic standing on our superior cognitive abilities. Our 12-lobed brains, evolved in Zenithia's unique quantum fields, had made us the undisputed masters of higher dimensional sciences. It was the cornerstone of our cultural identity, the reason other species sought our guidance, the foundation of our entire academic hierarchy. And here was this human, this simple biped with a laughably primitive brain, somehow bypassing a decade of training through what? Musical intuition? They've scheduled a demonstration for midday, Chancellor Morvidus continued. The human has requested access to the quantum core. The core? I nearly choked on my own respiratory fluids. That's absurd. Even I only use the core for the most critical research. It's not a teaching tool. Yet you authorized their access code, Zeltrax said, accusingly, sliding a permission form toward me. There was indeed my signature, though I had no recollection of providing it. They must have, that is, I would never, I sputtered. Regardless of how they obtained access, Director Navix interrupted. The demonstration will proceed. The Galactic Science Council has expressed interest. Representatives from 17 species will be attending. 17 species? The implications hit me like a gravitational collapse. If a human demonstrated mastery of quantum neural programming in just 3 days, the entire power structure of galactic academia could shift. Research grants, publishing priorities, speaking engagements at prestigious conferences. All the things that made life worth living could be jeopardized. This is outrageous. Professor Quiblix from Theoretical Physics burst out. We can't allow a primitive species to access our most advanced technology. Who knows what damage they could cause? I agree, added Professor Narvala. The human lacks the necessary brain structure to fully comprehend 11-dimensional space. Any apparent success must be a fluke, or, worse, a dangerous shortcut that could destabilize the quantum field. I should have joined the chorus of outrage. Every fiber of my professional being wanted to. And yet a small, traitorous part of my scientific mind was burning with curiosity. How had Alex Reeves done it? What cognitive pathway had the human discovered that we, with all our advanced evolution, had missed? When I arrived at the quantum core chamber at midday, the observation gallery was packed. Not just Academy faculty, but officials from the Galactic Science Council, diplomatic representatives, and most troubling of all, members of the press. Word had spread faster than a quantum entanglement chain reaction. The quantum core itself hummed with energy at the center of the chamber, a swirling vortex of dimensional instability contained within a series of force fields. Normally, it would take 3 Zenithian master programmers to interface with it safely. Today, there was just one small human figure standing before it, wearing a modified neural interface headset connected to those primitive audio devices. Dr. Vex. Alex waved when they saw me enter. Their face showed no sign of understanding the political storm they'd created. Thank you for coming, and for approving my access to the core. I did no such, I began, then caught myself. What exactly do you intend to demonstrate today? A unified theory of quantum cognitive interfacing, Alex said excitedly. I've discovered something amazing about how consciousness interacts with quantum states. Before I could respond, Director Navix called for silence and formally opened the demonstration. Today we witness an unprecedented event, he announced to the gallery. A human, after just 3 days of training, will attempt to interface with the quantum core, a feat that typically requires a decade of Zenithian neural development. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I noticed several Zenithian students, including my prize pupil Tarvik, watching with expressions ranging from skepticism to open hostility. The human will attempt to solve the Morvidian quantum conundrum, a problem that has stumped our best minds for over a century, Navix continued. The Morvidian conundrum. They were setting the human up for humiliating failure. Even I had only managed partial solutions to that infamous problem. To my surprise, Alex didn't appear intimidated. They simply nodded, closed their eyes, and began to hum softly as they connected to the core through their modified interface. The chamber's displays lit up, showing the human's neural patterns alongside the quantum field fluctuations. What happened next defies easy explanation. Alex's humming grew more complex, shifting into what sounded like a multi-layered melody with harmonies that shouldn't have been possible from a single voice. The display showed quantum probabilities coalescing, folding, restructuring in ways I'd never seen before. "What are they doing?" whispered Zeltrax beside me. "They're playing with it," I realized aloud. Not forcing the quantum field into predetermined patterns like we do, but adapting to its natural flows, like dancing with it. The gallery watched in stunned silence as Alex manipulated the quantum field not through brute computational force as Zenithians would, but through a form of intuitive, adaptive pattern recognition. The human wasn't thinking in 11 dimensions, they were feeling them as a musician feels a complex symphony. After 20 minutes, Alex opened their eyes. The quantum core had stabilized into a configuration I'd never seen before, elegant, harmonious, perfectly balanced. "The solution to the Morvidian conundrum," Alex announced simply, "lies not in forcing quantum states into predefined configurations, but in recognizing that consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon. We've been trying to solve it from the outside, when we needed to become part of the equation." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some officials were demanding verification, others were calling it a trick, while several younger Zenithian scientists rushed forward to examine the core's readings with the fervor of religious converts witnessing a miracle. I stood frozen, my academic worldview shattering into quantum uncertainty before my eyes. The human had done the impossible, not because they were like us, but precisely because they weren't. Their cognitive limitations had forced them to find another path, a creative workaround that we, in our evolutionary complacency, had never considered. And in that moment of scientific crisis, I experienced something rare for a Zenithian of my stature, the humbling recognition that perhaps, just perhaps, I had been completely and utterly wrong. Log entry 456.786, Zenithian date cycle, 87.33.025. Recording Officer, Dr. Xarlon Vex, Department Head, Quantum Neural Programming. The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences on Zenithia has never experienced anything quite like the aftermath of yesterday's demonstration. The hallowed halls that once echoed with confident Zenithian voices now buzz with uncertain whispers. The smooth-flowing hierarchy that kept our society so perfectly ordered for millennia now ripples with disturbance. In short, we're having what humans apparently call an existential crisis. How dramatic. How inconvenient. How refreshing. The Academic Council has been in emergency session for 26 consecutive hours. According to my sources, by which I mean the gossip network operated by the maintenance drones, several distinguished professors have threatened to resign in protest. Professor Quiblix actually suffered an ink expulsion event so severe during the debate that 3 junior faculty members required decontamination treatments. Meanwhile, the Galactic Science Council has issued a formal request to establish a new research initiative focused on alternative cognitive approaches to quantum sciences. The budget allocation they're suggesting is, well, let's just say it contains more zeros than a quantum probability field approaching absolute certainty. And what of the human who caused this uproar? Alex Reeves has been surprisingly subdued. While the Academy burns figuratively around them, the human has been quietly working in my laboratory, refining their technique and documenting their methodology. You could be demanding research grants, prestigious appointments, perhaps even your own department, I pointed out when I found them tinkering with their modified interface this morning. Why aren't you capitalizing on your achievement? Alex looked up, seemingly puzzled by the question. That's not why I did this, Dr. Vex. Then why? Surely not purely for the advancement of knowledge? I scoffed. No species is that selfless. Not selflessness, Alex replied thoughtfully. Curiosity, maybe, and hope. Hope? The concept seemed irrelevant. Hope that different minds can complement each other. That cognitive diversity might be more valuable than cognitive superiority. The human smiled. Your brain evolved to process 11 dimensions naturally. Mine didn't. So I had to get creative, translate the quantum world into something I could understand. Music, I said, still finding the concept both primitive and strangely elegant. Yes, but it's more than that. Humans are pattern recognition specialists. We evolved to find connections between seemingly unrelated things. Where Zenithians excel at processing complexity within established frameworks, we excel at jumping between frameworks. Lateral thinking. I settled all 8 of my limbs into a contemplative posture. You're suggesting that your success stems not from overcoming your cognitive limitations, but from leveraging them? Exactly. Alex's face lit up with that peculiar human expression of excitement. And imagine what we could accomplish by combining approaches. Your species' natural quantum processing abilities paired with our pattern recognition and creative problem solving. I'd been so focused on the threat to our scientific supremacy that I'd overlooked something fundamental. The human hadn't made this breakthrough despite being human, they'd made it because they were human. The revelation struck me with unexpected force. For millennia, we Zenithians had built our identity around being the most cognitively advanced species in the galaxy. We had classified, categorized, and ranked all other species based on how closely they approached our capabilities. But what if that entire framework was flawed? What if cognitive diversity offered advantages that cognitive uniformity, however advanced, could not? The implications extended far beyond one human's surprising mastery of quantum neural programming. If each species brought unique cognitive approaches to scientific problems, then the potential for advancement through collaboration was exponentially greater than through competition. Later that day, the Academy hosted a formal reception in Alex's honor. The human looked uncomfortable with the attention but endured it with grace. I watched as they patiently explained their methodology to clusters of still skeptical Zenithian professors and wide-eyed students. Your student has certainly disrupted the status quo, Director Navik said, gliding up beside me. The Board of Governors is divided between those who wish to suppress the human's findings and those who want to exploit them immediately. And what do you think we should do? I asked, surprised by my own neutrality on the question. Navik's eye stalks performed a subtle dance that indicated deep uncertainty, a rare expression for any Zenithian in a leadership position. I think we may need to reconsider some of our fundamental assumptions about cognitive hierarchy, perhaps even about our place in the galactic community. A radical notion, I observed. Indeed, almost as radical as a human mastering quantum neural programming in 3 days. Navix gestured toward Alex, who was now demonstrating their auditory interface to a group of young Zenithian students. The students were attempting to mimic the human's humming technique, producing sounds that ranged from painful to moderately interesting. They're teaching each other, I realized aloud. Not competing. Teaching. As the reception concluded, Alex approached me with that now familiar expression of friendly respect that I had initially mistaken for simple-mindedness. Dr. Vex, I wanted to thank you. Without your class and your research, none of this would have been possible. You're thanking me? After I dismissed your capabilities and actively attempted to prove your inferiority? Alex shrugged. You challenged me, and you were willing to change your mind when presented with new evidence. That's what good scientists do, regardless of species. How diplomatically phrased, I remarked dryly. A promising career in intergalactic politics awaits you. The human laughed, a curious sound that I found oddly less grating than I had initially. No thanks. I'd rather stay in research. Actually, I was hoping, that is, if you're open to it, perhaps we could collaborate? Your direct quantum perception combined with my auditory method, we might make breakthroughs neither of us could achieve alone. I should have been offended by the suggestion that I, Dr. Xarlon Vex, with 300 published papers and 7 Zenithian science medals, needed to collaborate with a species that had only recently figured out how to leave their own solar system. Instead, I found myself intrigued. An interesting proposition. I shall consider it. As I made the final recordings in my official log that evening, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary events of the past 3 days. One human with a modified audio device and an unconventional approach had undermined thousands of years of Zenithian scientific orthodoxy. The galaxy would never be quite the same. Perhaps we had been asking the wrong question all along. Not which species is most cognitively advanced, but what unique cognitive abilities does each species bring to our collective understanding? I, Dr. Xarlon Vex, renowned expert in quantum neural programming, 12-lobe genius of Zenithia, and 7-time recipient of the Zenithian Science Medal, we have been forced to consider a truly unsettling possibility. We might have something to learn from other species, especially humans. Oh, they still smell strange, make too much noise, and have a disturbing lack of tentacles. But they possess something that may be more valuable than all our formal training and neurological advantages: the ability to look at the seemingly impossible and say, I wonder if there's another way to approach this. So perhaps the most important lesson from this entire debacle isn't about quantum neural programming at all. Perhaps it's this: next time you're told something will take 10 years to master, consider whether that timeline was calculated for your species or someone else's. And maybe, just maybe, start humming. End log. P.S. I've begun preliminary research into human music theory, purely for scientific purposes, of course. Though I must admit there's something oddly appealing about what they call jazz fusion. The chaotic improvisational structure maps surprisingly well to quantum fluctuation patterns. Not that I would ever admit this to the human,